Welcome to Damn Good Movie Memories with your host, Brian Davis. This podcast is the cure for your long commute and super boring workday. Hey there, it's Brian Davis, and for this week's episode, we're going to talk about original roles that were supposed to go to certain actors and actresses. Eventually, they went to the people that you know and love. However, it's always fun to go through a list of people that could have played certain roles. Now, originally, this was going to be a normal Damn Good Movies episode where we, interview people and get their take on things. But after thinking about it, I realized that most people would probably have the same research. So I had interviewed Sarah, who was always excellent on the show, a long time ago, probably back in I think it was November of last year. And I kind of sat on it and then kind of compiled a list on my own, just doing some research and just finding things as I found them. And then decided, well, if I never got enough interviews for a particular episode, I could always use this as a back burner episode. And that's what we're going to do this week. So I will play my interview with Sarah, and then I'll come back and read my list that I discovered for this particular topic. So we're back with Sarah, and so this episode we're going through actors
roles that went to were originally supposed to go to other actors.
Exactly. So I
can do your job.
Thank you.
Okay.
I know. No more Jello shots.
I know. I thought it was a different show.
I know.
Okay, so a lot of times I'm really surprised by this when you read or whatever and find out it was supposed to, because you already have, once you've seen a movie, it's hard to imagine another actor doing it, right? So I had read that I'm pronouncing that Matt Damon movie is Elysium.
Yes.
Did I say it correctly?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because it's a tongue twister.
Yeah.
Was originally they asked Eminem to do it.
Wow.
And he was all set, but he wanted a lot of the filming to be done in Detroit. Maybe because he needed to be near his daughter, maybe because he wanted to bring in some revenue, whatever. And so they kind of kept negotiating. They were like, no, I don't know how, especially because they have to film in Mexico.
Right,
and
or Canada.
8 Mile might be a little seedy, but I don't think it looks like Mexico.
Right.
Just saying. So then he didn't end up going through with it. And Matt Damon did a good job. I liked him. Yeah. I could kind of see Eminem in that. It would have been nice for him to do something else besides 8 Mile to see if he could have
Because he's never been in anything else, right?
No, and he kind of plays himself, but that's another role. Rappers do a good job to transition into film because of that. So, another one, these are some interesting ones.
Yeah.
So, originally offered the part that Christian Bale took in American Psycho. Can you guess? Let me watch this. Leonardo DiCaprio.
Really?
Yeah. So, I loved American Psycho.
Yeah.
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I know that it was there was a big push on it. They had to edit it to get it not be an NC-17.
Right.
And this
crazy.
is what, 90s?
And even then it was still pretty hardcore.
Right.
Yeah.
And it made serial killers look fun.
Yeah.
And dancing to Susudio or whatever.
Did you read the book?
No, but I heard the book is really pretty.
Even more graphic.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. So I could kind of see a Leo doing that. He could.
He's a good actor.
Yeah, he probably could have pulled it off. A lot of but also Jared Leto was in that as well. He played kind of for a second.
That's true.
Any of them could have probably done that because that role is a little generic kind of. He's just this yuppie kind of guy. Mm-hmm. So that one I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that could have worked. Yeah.
Another one that is going to just Titanic, our not favorite movie, or mine.
We've gone over it
originally, the part of Rose, who Kate Winslet got, is it Kate Winslet? Yeah,
yes.
Was going to be played by Gwyneth Paltrow.
No.
Right.
No, but because everyone had been happy.
Right, and the thing is, she's too skinny for that era.
Yeah.
And remember, there was a bunch of controversy about, she's a big girl, and it was like,
but
she's an average girl.
Yeah.
Thank you. And God, the part where he has to draw her. It's like you just want to draw a stick person. There you go, little round head.
Yeah.
Then I wouldn't have cared that
there's where the ending would have been like.
It would have been awesome.
Save Leo. Yeah.
Let the frickin' scarecrow sink.
That's right.
Because whatever, nobody cared. He could have floated on her like a broomstick. So
you really didn't care in 7 when they cut her head off.
No, I was kind of like, well, there you go.
Yeah.
And that was when her and Brad Pitt were dating, had the same hairdo.
That's right.
Kinda. Then this one, I'm trying to think. I have a couple. How many can I do? How many do you want to hear?
Hey, this is your show.
This will be a quick one. Okay, so Pretty Woman was originally offered to Molly Ringwald.
No way.
Yes. Is it? So that was coming off of the 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink.
So one ginger to the other.
Right. And it's like, guess what? Because that's what made Julia Roberts. And wait,
totally
Molly
did.
who?
Yeah.
Where'd she go?
Yeah.
What happened? Like, even Ducky got his own TV show with frickin' crackhead, what's his name? The Tiger Milk.
2.5 Men?
Yes, but he was...
Tiger Milk.
He got that with...
Tiger Blood.
With, what's his name? Who was he? The crazy guy with
Charlie
strippers.
Sheen.
Thank you,
Yes,
thank you.
Tiger Milk.
I don't watch him. I just hear a little bit
You
of
are
it.
not winning.
I'm not winning, right?
Yeah.
So that Molly apparently passed that one up.
I don't think that it would have been weird.
No, Molly Ringwald is not a hooker.
Yeah.
And we already would have seen her as like what was those characters.
Yeah.
So
Richard, it would have to have been like the Jason Alexander character playing Richard Gere for it to be.
Oh my God! Yeah. Oh, creepy. So then my last two, but it's the same movie. It's Matrix.
Okay.
Movies, trilogy, whatever.
Yep.
So originally Neo's role, that Keanu, which really
anyone could have played that.
He plays what? He's just a more articulate, like Ted from Bill and Ted.
Right.
If you just a little bit. He was that role of Neo was offered to Will Smith.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah, he could have pulled that off because especially now after seeing him in
Men in Black
ones, right, and even like he did Ali, he can transform.
Yeah, he can do it.
I Am Legend, he was good. He was intense. So you know who was offered the role of Morpheus?
No,
and Larry Fishburne, great, whatever. Sean Connery.
That would have been really interesting.
I'm a huge fan of Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even care if he's 80. Like, he comes for me, I'm going with him. Like,
I know it's like sacrilege, but that would have been good. Will Smith and Connery.
Or one or the other. Maybe I would have taken Sean Connery over that. But it's like, could you imagine? The way that Morpheus talks.
Yeah.
But to have Sean Connery, like, that would have been great.
That would have been cool.
If I could have if I ever died, like my funeral to be narrated by Sean Connery. And who is the other guy?
James Earl Jones?
No, the one who is from Shawshank.
Oh, yeah. Why can't I even think of his name?
I know.
stupid.
Morgan Freeman. I win! 1-0.
We need to stop drinking.
Morgan Freeman and Sean Connery.
Are you kidding?
I don't know because it's Jello shots.
Yes.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman and so can you get a memo out to them just in case?
I will.
Yeah, Sean Connery. Yeah. Both of them. All right.
That's awesome. Those are great. All right, Sarah's always great, but the way I'm going to do this now for the rest of the episode, you're only going to hear me. So if you don't like your lovable host, then this is not going to be the episode for you. So bear with me. But I think you're going to enjoy the topic because there's some very interesting changes of roles that could have been made if they had gone with their original picks. Now, I'm going to split this up into... 4 different things. One is just Stallone, because Stallone turned down a lot of roles that would have been very different if he had been in those movies. And then I'm going to go through dramas, action movies, and comedies. And so we'll kind of break them up a little bit. But as for Sylvester Stallone, so the movie Romancing the Stone was originally offered to Sylvester Stallone instead of Michael Douglas. This would have made the movie completely different. He actually turned down this role to star in Rhinestone. Now, if you listen to the Guilty Pleasure episode, you'll know that Rhinestone is one of my guilty pleasures, but it's not a good movie. Romancing the Stone definitely stands the test of time. That's an excellent movie, and Michael Douglas was perfect in that role. I'm not sure Stallone would have been as good. Another one, Christopher Reeve actually declined the role. Now, Christopher Reeve is a great actor, but really, besides Superman, he hadn't been in much, so he was kind of still, going through his Superman cachet. But again, Michael Douglas was the perfect role as Jack Colton in Romancing the Stone. Another Stallone vehicle was supposed to be, and this is well known, Beverly Hills Cop. It was supposed to be more of an action thriller movie, and Paramount couldn't come to terms with the script that Stallone wanted. I also think it was going to be too much money. So instead, they went with Eddie Murphy, and I believe that was the right choice because that movie was super successful with Eddie Murphy. One more Stallone movie is The Terminator instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I could see that. They both have interesting accents. That could have been well. Now, here's one for the same movie. They considered using O.J. Simpson instead of Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. Is that prophetic? I don't know, but yeah, the Terminator, OJ. Yep, I think he's better in The Naked Gun, getting beaten up and shot. Anyway, let's get into dramas next. Okay, for dramas, let's start with American Gigolo. Of course, that was made famous by Richard Gere, but John Travolta was considered originally. I can see that. That doesn't seem too far off base. Okay, next, here's the one that everyone should have seen, and that's The Godfather. Now, there's a few different changes that would have made this movie entirely different, and I don't think would have worked in my opinion. Instead of James Caan playing the Sonny role, Burt Reynolds was offered that role. I'm not sure, maybe, but Burt Reynolds, he wasn't super famous yet. He was I might have been in The Longest Yard at that point, but no, he wasn't super well known. Here's a really interesting one. Instead of Michael, which was Al Pacino, of course, Jack Nicholson was considered for that role. I don't know. Who's better than Al Pacino in that movie? So it's hard. As great as Nicholson is, I think they made a better choice with Pacino. Now, for The Godfather Part 3, I don't think anything could have helped that. But, of course, Sofia Coppola, who is often panned and cries of nepotism for getting her role in that movie, Winona Ryder was originally considered for that role, and obviously that would have been a better choice. Okay, Silence of the Lambs. Instead of Jodie Foster, Michelle Pfeiffer was considered, which, that might have worked, but Jodie Foster was excellent as Clarice. So it's hard to not go with Jodie Foster there. Two others that were considered for the same role as Clarice. Laura Dern was considered, and Meg Ryan, which I definitely can't see that one. Michelle Pfeiffer, I think, would have been a decent, obvious choice originally, but I think ultimately it's hard to fault going with Jodie Foster. Sleepless in Seattle. Meg Ryan's character was considered by Michelle Pfeiffer. There you go. There's a connection. I'm not sure. Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks always had a great chemistry together. So I could maybe Michelle Pfeiffer was too exotic and in those kind of roles to be kind of just a lovable non-exotic person. The other one that was considered was Julia Roberts, which maybe I could see that, but I think Meg Ryan was the right choice. Here's a weird one. The movie Ghost. So instead of Patrick Swayze, Paul Hogan, Crocodile Dundee was considered. I don't get this at all. I searched a few times. I'm like, is this bullshit? But no, Paul Hogan was considered in the Patrick Swayze role. The other one, which definitely would have made sense, was Bruce Willis. Demi Moore, they were together. That would have been fine. It's not like it was an amazing work of art anyway, so not having Patrick Swayze would have been fine. Jerry Maguire. Okay, Tom Cruise, of course, played Jerry Maguire, and Tom Hanks was considered. Okay, that might have been all right, because how can you go wrong with Tom Hanks? And instead of Renee Zellweger, they considered Winona Ryder. So, interesting. Forrest Gump. So, of course, Tom Hanks famously played Forrest Gump. John Travolta turned down the role for Pulp Fiction. I think that all turned out fine. I don't see Travolta being as good as Forrest Gump. The Graduate, of course, famous for being Dustin Hoffman, one of his breakout roles. Guess the person that was offered The Graduate was Burt Ward. Now, if you don't know who Burt Ward is, that was Robin from the Batman series from the 60s. Yeah, I don't think the movie would have stood this test of time if Robin played The Graduate.
Holy nightmare!
All right, Gone with the Wind. Vivian Leigh, of course, played Scarlett. Bette Davis was considered. How can you go wrong with Bette Davis? That would have been fine. Pretty Woman. Now, Sarah mentioned that Molly Ringwald was considered instead of Julia Roberts. Daryl Hannah was also considered. I could see that. And then instead of Richard Gere, Al Pacino was considered. So, yeah, that different movie. It would have been a different movie.
Hoo-ah!
The Breakfast Club. This is famous. John Bender was played by Judd Nelson. John Cusack was considered. Cusack, a great actor, but I think as just the punk role, I think they got it right with Judd Nelson, even though he was probably pushing 30 instead of a 17-year-old. The Blind Side. Sandra Bullock, I think, won an Oscar for that role. Julia Roberts was considered for that. Footloose. Instead of Kevin Bacon, Tom Cruise was considered. Yeah, okay. I guess he was dancing around in his underpants in Risky Business, so why not Footloose? The movie Seven, Brad Pitt, his role was offered to Denzel Washington. That would have been fine with me. You have Denzel and Morgan Freeman together. That sounds like a winning team. Boogie Nights, instead of Mark Wahlberg, Leonardo DiCaprio. Okay, that would have been interesting. Edward Scissorhands, so instead of Johnny Depp, a few people were considered. Jim Carrey, I could see that. Robert Downey Jr., interesting. And Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise was offered a lot of movies. But ultimately, I think Johnny Depp was a good pick. $1 Million Baby, instead of Hilary Swank, Sandra Bullock was considered. Monsters Ball, instead of Halle Berry, Angela Bassett, who off of What's Love Got to Do It when she played Tina Turner, I think she would have been fine in that role. Showgirls, so of course, terrible movie. Elizabeth Berkley, who was best known as Jessie Spano in Saved by the Bell. Drew Barrymore was offered this role. That might have killed her career. So she, at that point, she was already at a low point. I'm not sure she would have had a nice comeback if she had taken Showgirls. American Beauty. Now, I can't believe this one, but I'm going to say it anyway. Kevin Spacey's role was originally offered to Chevy Chase. Okay, no, I think they made the right choice with Kevin Spacey. Thelma and Louise. All right, so obviously Gina Davis, Susan Sarandon got the parts that everyone knows about. Originally, they were offered to Melanie Griffith and Cher. I don't think it would have stood the test of time with that duo. Shawshank Redemption. Instead of the Tim Robbins character, Kevin Costner. So you have a Bull Durham connection there. Costner, I enjoy Kevin Costner movies, but I think Tim Robbins nailed that role. Midnight Cowboy. John Voight, famously in this movie. Elvis Presley was considered instead of John Voight. I don't know. And then lastly, for dramas, The Untouchables. Kevin Costner famously played Elliot Ness. This was originally offered to Mickey Rourke. Okay, I mean, that's fine. I think Connery definitely made the role, and Andy Garcia were fine. So if Mickey Rourke was there, I don't know if it would have changed that much, but I enjoy Kevin Costner. All right, let's get into action films next. Okay, one of the most iconic action series of all times is James Bond. And so originally, instead of Sean Connery, Cary Grant was obviously thought of as being the iconic James Bond. He might have been a little bit too old, so it was part of it. But with that said, he turned it down because he didn't want to be tied down to a film series, knowing that this would be something that was ongoing. Couldn't have, thought it would last for almost 50 years, but still. If he was younger, nobody was more suave. Nobody could be, he could play any role, Cary Grant. So I could have definitely seen him, being in the James Bond role. Hugh Jackman was considered instead of Daniel Craig. I could see that, but Wolverine might have been a better choice. I think Daniel Craig's excellent as the current James Bond. Also, Pierce Brosnan was considered instead of Timothy Dalton during the 80s era, but he was doing Remington Steele, and so that didn't happen. Also, Roger Moore was considered after Cary Grant instead of Sean Connery. Of course, Roger Moore got it after Sean Connery. Back to the Future. This is well known. So Michael J. Fox, of course, got Marty McFly, but Eric Stoltz was. There's plenty of scenes with him playing the Marty role, and he was Marty. And eventually, it just didn't turn out. It didn't work out, and Michael J. Fox was hired. But little known was Johnny Depp actually tested for the role, but obviously didn't get through. All right, Star Wars. Al Pacino turned down the role for Han Solo. Interesting. I just don't see him as Han Solo. But plenty of people tried out for the role that, of course, Harrison Ford got. So in addition to Al Pacino, Christopher Walken, Kurt Russell, Nick Nolte, Chevy Chase also considered for the Han Solo role. All of them, I could definitely see Kurt Russell. A little bit Nick Nolte, no way Chevy Chase. All right, The Hunt for the Red October. Alec Baldwin, of course, got the Jack Ryan role, but Harrison Ford, who eventually got it, was considered for that role. And then Kevin Costner was considered. I could have seen that as well. Top Gun. Now, of course, Tom Cruise played Maverick, and everyone knows that role. But Matthew Modine was really considered for that role, and him coming off Vision Quest. Cruise was a star, but not like a superstar. Top Gun pretty much made Tom Cruise a superstar. Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is pretty well known, but instead of Harrison Ford, Tom Selleck was really considered for the Raiders of the Lost Ark role, and it made sense. He was coming off, he had a huge hit TV show with Magnum, but the producer of Magnum wouldn't let him take time off to film Raiders of the Lost Ark, so it went to Harrison Ford. Die Hard. Now, Bruce Willis, of course, plays John McClane, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was considered. Okay. And Al Pacino. I just don't see Al Pacino being, John McClane. I could almost see Arnold doing it instead of Bruce, but not Al Pacino. The 1989 version of Batman. I don't believe this, but Michael J. Fox was considered instead of Michael Keaton. He's just too tiny to play Batman. Bill Murray was also considered until Tim Burton became director, and then that was it. Maybe as a jokester, but he'd be playing it like the campy, 1966 version with Adam West. So I don't know. I don't see Bill Murray. In Batman Returns, Michelle Pfeiffer, of course, played Catwoman, and Annette Bening was considered. I could have seen that. And instead of Danny DeVito as the Penguin, they considered Marlon Brando. That actually would have been pretty awesome. I could have seen that. Sarah mentioned Will Smith playing Neo in The Matrix. What you might not know, in addition to Will Smith, Tom Cruise was considered. So, interesting. Alien. Of course, Sigourney Weaver played Ripley. Meryl Streep was considered. And Meryl Streep's good in everything, so I think she could have pulled that off as well. In the original Superman, Christopher Reeve, of course, had his iconic role as Superman, but Christopher Walken was considered as Superman. I just don't see that. Hook, the movie Hook, which Dustin Hoffman played Captain Hook. David Bowie was considered. Interesting. Bad Boys, which, of course, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence played buddy cops. If you haven't heard our buddy cop episode, check that out. Dana Carvey and John Lovitz were considered instead of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. All right. Iron Man. Gwyneth Paltrow played Pepper Potts. Rachel McAdams was considered. Been fine with me. Lord of the Rings. I'm not a big Lord of the Rings guy, but this would have been interesting. Instead of Ian McKellen, Sean Connery was considered. Gladiator. Instead of Russell Crowe, Mel Gibson. Yep, could have seen that. In E.T., Dee Wallace played Elliot's mom. Shelley Long was considered. Interesting. North by Northwest, of course, that iconic Alfred Hitchcock role was played by Cary Grant. Yul Brynner was considered. In Marnie, another Hitchcock movie, Tippi Hedren was the main character. Grace Kelly was considered. By then, I think Grace Kelly was she done with acting? She might have been done with acting, and Hitchcock tried to bring her back, but yes. Okay, in the remake of Ocean's 11, the George Clooney role was originally offered to Bruce Willis. And then the Carl Reiner role was offered to Don Rickles and Alan Arkin. Interesting. Rickles, of course, was in Casino, so I could have seen that. And Alan Arkin is like the resident old guy now in most movies, so that would have been fine. And then instead of Bernie Mac, Danny Glover was considered. All right, let's get into comedies now. Now, I'd mentioned this before in past episodes, but in A Christmas Story, the famous role of the old man was, of course, played Darren McGavin. But Jack Nicholson was originally offered the role, and it would have been an entirely different movie. And as great as Jack Nicholson is, I don't think anyone would have been as good as Darren McGavin, because Jack's, just being so famous and so iconic, he would have taken away from the role. And really, the star of the film was Ralphie, even though the old man's character is so good in that movie. I don't think it would have worked as well. I don't think the movie would have been as much of a classic. Ghostbusters. So originally, John Belushi was supposed to be the main character instead of Bill Murray, and also John Candy was supposed to be in the role. So it was supposed to be Aykroyd, Belushi, and John Candy, which makes sense because Aykroyd and Belushi were like the duo of the time. But of course, John Belushi passed away. Aykroyd already had been writing this for years, and it turned into what it turned into, and it's hard to dispute what it turned into. Also, so John Candy was supposed to play the role of Rick Moranis, and then Winston almost went to Eddie Murphy. That would have been interesting. Toy Story. So the voice of Tom Hanks, who is the voice of Woody, was considered by Paul Newman. I think by that point, Paul Newman's voice is really gruff, and if you listen to the, his voice in the first Cars movie, I'm not sure it would have worked as well. The Wizard of Oz. So Frank Morgan, of course, played the all-powerful mighty Oz. W.C. Fields was considered for that role, and of course, he would have been great. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Instead of Matthew Broderick, Johnny Depp was considered. I don't think Johnny Depp has the wink and the smile that Matthew Broderick did for the Ferris character. I don't think that would have worked well. La La Land. Now, I haven't seen La La Land, but I'm sure many people that listen to this podcast have. Instead of Emma Stone, Emma Watson was considered. Fine. And then instead of Ryan Gosling, Miles Teller. Legally Blonde. Instead of Reese Witherspoon, Christina Applegate. Interesting. Clueless. Instead of Alicia Silverstone, Sarah Michelle Gellar, because she was pretty popular with Buffy the Vampire Slayer at that point. And instead of Paul Rudd, this would have been a horrible choice. Ben Affleck. Sorry, Ben. Austin Powers. Mike Myers actually considered Jim Carrey to play Dr. Evil, and I think that would have been a big mistake. In the movie Big, Tom Hanks instead, Tom Hanks, of course, played the iconic, playing a child in a man's body. Robert De Niro was considered. That wouldn't have worked. The movie Sister Act, of course, played by Whoopi Goldberg. Bette Midler considered. I can see that. She can sing. The Hangover, instead of Heather Graham, it was going to be Lindsay Lohan. I think Heather Graham was better. Adventures in Babysitting. Of course, Elizabeth Shue played the babysitter, Chris, but many people were considered for that role, including Jodie Foster, Valerie Bertinelli, Michelle Pfeiffer. Geez, Michelle Pfeiffer was offered a lot of roles. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Justine Bateman were all considered for the role of Elizabeth Shue. I think she was fine. I can't see Jodie Foster playing the babysitter. All right, the Addams Family movie, instead of Angelica Houston, Cher was considered. Interesting. Grease, instead of John Travolta, Henry Winkler. Now, this makes perfect sense. Henry Winkler was playing the Fonz in Happy Days, so that made perfect sense, but I'm not sure it would have been iconic without John Travolta. And last, Kindergarten Cop. Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, played Kindergarten Cop. It's not a tumor. It could have been Bill Murray. No. Bill Murray's great, but just how stupid that movie is. It's cheesy fun, but nah, it's got to be Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Who is your daddy, and what does he do?
All right. That's all I got for this week. I hope you enjoyed. It wasn't a typical episode, but I hope you enjoyed all the research we had to do to get all this, and my crack staff and interns got all this for me. Yeah, right. All right, until next week, this is Brian signing off. If you enjoyed this podcast and are an iTunes user, please do the show a favor and head on over to the official iTunes page for Damn Good Movie Memories. Be sure to leave a rating and a review. This will allow the show to appear higher in the algorithm and spread the joy of this podcast to the masses. If you are not an iTunes user, you can still listen and subscribe on Podbean at damngoodmoviememories.podbean.com. Be sure to like us on Facebook under our Damn Good Movie Memories page. You can also listen to a limited number of episodes on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and be sure to tune in next week for an all-new episode of Damn Good Movie Memories.